You may wonder why I'm spending so much time worrying about shelter. And what it comes down to is priorities. And the way I've done it is I've set these priorities up in something I call the rule of threes. And it works like this. Normally you have about 3 minutes of survival without air. If you're underwater for 3 minutes, there's a good chance you're going to die. If you're out in the mountains and it gets cold out, wind is blowing, you're wet, you have about 3 hours of survival without shelter. You're in the desert or you're walking through the mountains and it's warm outside and you have no water. You have about 3 days without water. And you know what? It takes almost 3 weeks for you to die with no food. In fact, some people can last a lot longer than just 3 little weeks. But you know what happens? People get stuck out in the wilderness and they look around and they say, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Holy moly, I got to get something to eat. I'm going to go hunting. Huh. Long before they get an animal, they've died from exposure. They died that night. Keep your priorities straight. Follow the rule of threes. It'll get you through a lot of nasty situations. So, when you find yourself out in the mountains and you look around that first time searching for the ideal shelter, you're going to run into a phenomena that a lot of people do. They say, God, it's big out here. There's a lot of places. Where do I start looking? Well, there's some techniques that'll help to reduce the kind of search that you start off on. One, if you're in the northern hemisphere, which I assume you are, what you're going to be searching for is a slope that's exposed to the sunlight during the daytime. We call those south-facing slopes. In other words, they face south. In the northern hemisphere, for the most part, the sun will be to the south. It'll be rising in the east, setting in the west, but it'll be in the south. So any slope that faces to the south is going to be receiving more solar radiation during the daytime. So that helps to narrow the search. Look around you for a slope that faces to the south. The next thing that you do is search for an area that has a slightly different vegetation than other areas. South-facing slopes tend to be a little drier, a little rockier, and have a different type of vegetation than north-facing slopes. That's because there's less moisture in the soil, the plants that grow there are different, and a variety of other things. There tends to be a little bit more erosion, and so forth. This behind me is a south-facing slope, and it's a good example of it. Now it looks pretty barren, but there you are, look down, you look up on the side of a mountain, you find a south-facing slope, you see a rocky area, it's kind of barren, and right up in there, there's some good shelters. Now these rocks here have been absorbing sunlight throughout the daytime. All night tonight they're going to be re-radiating that heat, and that's going to keep you warm. Most people have had an experience with re-radiated heat, natural heat. If you ride a bicycle or a motorcycle, you probably run into it many times. It might be a summer evening, you're riding your bicycle and suddenly it feels very warm. And then you ride a little farther and it cools off quite a bit. And then maybe again it gets warm. If you look down at the ground, when you feel it's starting to get warm, you'll probably notice that you're driving over asphalt. It's dark in color. It's been absorbing sunlight throughout the day and re-radiating that heat at night. So it keeps it nice and warm. If you're riding in a cooler area, look down and you'll see concrete. Lighter color, doesn't absorb as much heat, doesn't have as much to give up at night. Well, these rocks tend to be pretty light in color, but they are rocks and they do absorb a lot of heat. So this area in here is a good place to search for a shelter. A lot of nice microclimates. It's good and warm. We're about 50 to 75 feet above the valley floor. We're out of the majority of the wind. So this is the kind of area you're searching for. So let's take a look around in these rocks and see if we can find the place we want to spend the night. Yeah, you know, when you're tired and you're looking for a place to rest your head, almost anything seems comfortable. Nice pine needles, it's padded. Yeah, I think I could sleep here. Except for one little problem. You never want to sleep with your head downhill. You see, when you sleep downhill like that, the blood rushes to your head and you turn into a giant bloody head. And that's not good. What you really want to do is sleep on flat ground. You know, you might think, gosh, I could sleep on that same slope with my feet downhill. Yeah, you could. and then you'd slide all night long. And we had a student on a trip one time set up a tube tent on the ground on top of some pine needles on a slope just like this. Thought, oh, this is great, nice and comfortable. I think I'll just sleep here. Well, she went to sleep. I guess it was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when we heard this terrible scream, and we heard this thumping and bumping sound. Well, a lot of people got up and went running out to find out what made the noise, and there she was at the bottom of a canyon. That tube tent turned into a toboggan, the pine needles turned into snow, and she slid all the way to the bottom. You know, she thought somebody was kidnapping her. Nah, find a flat spot, it's worth doing a little extra walking. So we'll keep on checking. I'm here. I'm going to make this into my sleeping quarters. And it's just about time to get to work, because I don't have a lot of time left before that sun goes down. I said that I didn't have too much time until the sun went down. But how do I know that other than just looking up there and seeing, well, the sun looks like it's about to go down. Here's a little trick that you might enjoy. It's sometimes called fist time. And all it requires is a fist or two. Here's how it works. A fist, when you hold it out in front of you about like this, bisects about 15 degrees of arc. Now that may sound a little strange or not too useful, but when you know that 15 goes into 360 24 times, then maybe you can make the connection that, golly, one fist equals about 1 hour of sun time, because that's about how long it takes for us to see the sun in the same position the next day, 24 hours. So what we do is this. We put our fist out at the horizon where we think the sun is going to go down, and that's 1 hour. Another fist on top of that, that's 2 hours. Another fist on top of that, and that's 3 hours, and so forth. Well, all you need to do is to make a count to the lower edge of the disk of the sun. And don't look directly at the sun. The number of fists to the lower edge of the disk of the sun is the number of hours till sunset where you're standing. And since you'll see 4 knuckles on each 1 hour, you can say that this is 15 minutes, 30, 45, and an hour. So in that way, each finger's worth 15 minutes on a 1 hour fist. Now your hand may be a little bit different. Your arms may be a little shorter, your fist may be a little larger, or maybe you've got tiny little hands and long arms. Don't know. So what you've got to do is accurize your fist. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. You could whittle a big fist down, or you can swell a big fist up, but the best way to do it is just to actually find out how many minutes one of these fists is worth. The way I recommend it is simple. Find the horizon, wherever you happen to be, and put your fist out at the horizon, with the horizon at the bottom of your fist. And count the number of fists it takes until your hand is pointing straight up in the air. If it takes 6, guess what? You've got a 15 degree fist. If it takes more than that, you could work out how many degrees it's worth, and from that you could tell how many minutes a fist will be worth to you when you hold it out like that. But remember, it's really important. Don't look directly at the sun. Okay, the spot here that I've chosen to spend the night in is this right here up against the rock. I'll have that rock close to me, and I'll flatten this area out just on this side. Now since this slope tilts a little bit this way, in towards you, and from up here, that direction, I'm going to need to do something to stabilize this, to keep it from sliding down the hill naturally. So what I'll do is I'll put some kind of a barrier, maybe a few logs or rocks or something along those lines, right in this area here, along this line. And that'll keep these pine needles from shifting down. Then I'm going to make up a nice thick layer of pine needles, and of course I'll remove my little friends here, and that should make a nice comfortable bed. So I'm going to get to work at it, and I'll show you in just a little bit what it looks like.